Hello, everyone. One of the most powerful things I've ever learned is the value of silence. We live in a world that's constantly talking. Everyone wants to be seen, everyone wants to be heard. Social media has made it easier than ever to tell the world what we're doing, what we're building, what we're chasing. But here's the thing: noise doesn't equal progress. Greatness doesn't scream, it whispers. We often equate visibility with value. In a world where everyone is sharing, posting, and documenting every move. It's easy to believe that being loud means you're making progress. But the truth is, noise doesn't equal progress. Think about it. We see people talking constantly about what they're working on, the big plans they have, the dreams they're chasing. And while it might feel inspiring on the surface, often it's more about perception than process. The constant need to be seen can distract us from the actual work that leads to growth. It can make us more focused on how things look than on how things are. And that's dangerous. There's a big difference between movement and momentum. A hamster on a wheel is moving, but it's not going anywhere. Real progress, true forward motion, often happens in silence. It happens when no one is watching, when there's no validation, no recognition, just intention, just effort, just consistency. The people who achieve meaningful success, the kind that lasts, are not obsessed with showing the world what they're doing every step of the way. They're obsessed with doing it better, doing it with purpose. They're not distracted by the performance of progress. They're committed to the practice of it. We're conditioned now to think that if we're not talking about it, we're falling behind. If we're not building in public, we're not serious. But that's not always true. Some of the most brilliant breakthroughs happen in private. Some of the strongest habits are built in solitude. Some of the most transformational growth takes place when no one knows your name and no one is watching you rise. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're doing the work without needing to announce it. When you trust your process so deeply that you no longer need others to validate it, that's when you're really growing. That's when you're moving beyond surface level success and stepping into real mastery. Noise is tempting because it brings attention. It gives a quick hit of validation, but it doesn't build character, it doesn't develop discipline, and it certainly doesn't sustain progress. What sustains progress is showing up even when no one claps for you. It's doing the hard things when no one is paying attention. It's falling in love with the process, not the performance. When we focus too much on the external, on what people think, what they say, how many likes or views we get, we lose connection with the why behind what we're doing. And without a clear why, progress becomes performative. We end up chasing applause instead of impact. That's why it's so important to tune out the noise, both from the outside world and from your own internal pressure to be seen. Because the loudest person in the room isn't always the one with the most to say. And the person who's quietly improving themselves, step by step, day by day, that's the one to watch. So the next time you feel like you're not doing enough because you're not talking about it, remember this: you don't owe anyone updates on your growth. You don't have to perform your journey. What matters is that you keep going, you keep learning, you keep building, even in the quiet. Because progress isn't always visible, but it is always powerful. And it's in the silence where the real work gets done. When people hear the phrase focus on yourself, they often mistake it for selfishness. But there's a significant difference between being selfish and being intentional. Focusing on yourself doesn't mean you shut everyone out or stop caring about others. It means you make a conscious choice to turn inward, to understand who you are, what drives you, and where you're going. We live in a world that glorifies comparison. From a young age, we're told to measure our worth against others: grades, titles, followers, income, achievements. And while competition can push us, it can also pull us away from our true path. When we're always looking at what others are doing, we begin to question if we're doing enough, achieving enough, being enough. That's when we start losing alignment with ourselves. That's when we forget our own values and chase things just because they're popular, not because they're right for us. Focusing on yourself is an act of clarity. It's about asking deeper questions. What do I value? What does success mean to me? What kind of life do I want to build? These questions don't have easy answers, and they're not meant to be answered quickly, but the very act of asking them pulls you away from comparison and closer to purpose. When you focus on yourself, you begin to take ownership, not just of your goals, but of your habits, your mindset, your growth. You realize that no one else is responsible for your future, not your boss, not your parents, not society. It's you. Your choices, your discipline, your direction. And here's the powerful part. When you truly commit to your own growth, you become better for the people around you too. You show up more grounded, more intentional, more present. You don't drain others looking for validation because you've already found it within. You don't compete in a way that tears people down because you're not threatened by someone else's success. You're too focused on building your own. This kind of focus creates resilience because when things get hard, and they always do, you have a solid foundation to fall back on. You're not tossed around by trends or public opinion. You're guided by something stronger, your values, your purpose. And that doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes reflection. It takes choosing to unplug from the noise and plug into yourself. To stop asking, what are they doing? And start asking, what am I becoming? Now, that doesn't mean you isolate yourself or stop learning from others. In fact, some of the best personal growth comes from connection, mentorship, feedback, shared wisdom. But there's a difference between learning with others and living for their approval. One empowers you, the other limits you. Focusing on yourself is one of the most generous things you can do. Because the more you grow, the more you have to give. The more you understand your own path, the less tempted you are to judge or envy someone else's. You stop trying to outshine others and instead start trying to uplift them because your self-worth is no longer on the line. So when you hear that phrase, focus on yourself, don't shrink from it. Don't confuse it with selfishness or ego. See it for what it really is, a commitment to becoming the best version of you so you can live with more clarity, contribute with more depth, and lead with more impact. Because at the end of the day, you are the one living your life, no one else. And the better you know yourself, the better your life, and everyone in it will be. Leadership is often misunderstood. Many people think it begins the moment you manage a team, start a company, or gain a title. But real leadership starts much earlier and much deeper. It begins with self-leadership. Before you can guide, inspire, or influence others, you have to learn how to guide yourself. Think about the people you admire most, the ones who lead with strength, humility, and integrity. They didn't get there by accident. They became who they are because they learned to master the inner game first. They developed habits, mindset, discipline, and emotional awareness. They showed up for themselves long before anyone expected them to show up for others. Self-leadership is about taking ownership. It's the ability to hold yourself accountable even when no one's watching. It's waking up early to keep a promise to yourself. It's doing the right thing, not the easy thing. It's saying no to things that don't align with your values, even when those things are popular or convenient. We often want to skip this step because it's not glamorous. It doesn't come with recognition or applause. No one congratulates you for journaling every morning, for holding your boundaries, or for saying, I need to work on that. But these are the things that build character. These are the reps that build leadership muscle. When you develop the ability to lead yourself, you become reliable, you become steady, you're not tossed around by emotion, ego, or distraction. You make better decisions because you're anchored in self-awareness. You know what drives you, you know what triggers you, and you know how to course correct when you drift away from your values. One of the most overlooked qualities of a good leader is emotional regulation. If you can't manage your stress, your anger, or your insecurity, you'll project it onto others. You'll lead from fear instead of vision. You'll react instead of respond. That's why inner work is non-negotiable. It's not separate from leadership. It is leadership. And let's be honest, self-leadership is hard. It requires honesty. You have to face your flaws without denying them. You have to admit when you've been lazy, distracted, or afraid. But that's where growth happens. In the moments where you tell yourself the truth and then decide to do something about it. The beauty of self-leadership is that it creates ripple effects. When people see someone who is grounded, consistent, and clear in who they are, it gives them permission to do the same. You become a lighthouse not by shouting directions, but simply by shining. And others begin to follow, not because you told them to, but because your example speaks louder than your words. We spend so much time trying to be impressive to others, but if we spent even half of that time becoming impressed with our own discipline, our own growth, our own ability to get back up after failing, we become the kind of leaders people naturally trust and respect. Leadership isn't about control, it's about influence. And influence starts from within. You can't ask people to follow you if you haven't learned to follow your own principles. You can't ask for loyalty if you can't stay loyal to your own vision. And you can't ask for commitment from others if you keep breaking the commitments you make to yourself. So if you want to lead, start by looking inward. Start by asking, am I leading myself with clarity, with integrity, with intention? Because the moment you start showing up fully for yourself is the moment you start becoming a leader worth following. We've been conditioned to associate progress with visibility. If no one sees it, it doesn't count. If we're not posting about it, we're not really doing it. But that mindset can be incredibly misleading. Some of the most important breakthroughs in life happen long before anyone notices them. They happen behind closed doors, in solitude, in discipline, in repetition. The silent work is where your foundation is built. It's in the hours you spend learning when no one's asking you to. It's in the reps you put in at the gym when no one's watching. It's in the journaling, the reflection, the self-correction, the quiet decisions you make each day to become a little bit better. These moments may not look impressive to the outside world, but they are everything. Growth doesn't need to announce itself. It reveals itself over time. Just like seeds planted in the ground don't shout when they're growing roots, your personal development doesn't need a spotlight to be real. In fact, the deeper the roots, the stronger the growth. And roots grow in the dark. This is what separates people who make lasting change from those who burn out chasing instant results. The ones who are committed to the long game understand that patience is a strength. They know that silence is not a lack of progress. It's the space where progress matures. They aren't trying to win the sprint. They are building the endurance for the marathon. When you learn to love the quiet phase, you become unstoppable because now you're not driven by applause, you're driven by purpose. You're not chasing approval, you're chasing improvement. You're not performing for the crowd, you're preparing for your calling. This kind of mindset requires humility. It takes a willingness to be unseen, to put in the work when there's no reward in sight, but it also builds confidence. The real kind, not the loud, overcompensating kind, but the grounded, calm confidence that comes from knowing you've done the work. You don't have to tell anyone you're ready. You are ready, and your actions will prove it in time. The world will eventually catch up. The people who need to see your growth will see it, but by then, you won't need their validation. You'll have already validated yourself through the hours of work you put in when no one was looking. It's important to remember that silence is not weakness. It's strength under control. It's maturity, it's focus. And in that silence, you find your edge. You learn what you're made of. You build your mental toughness. You sharpen your vision. So if you're in a season of quiet where you're doing the work, but it feels like no one notices, don't panic. Don't doubt yourself. That season is sacred. It's where you're becoming. Keep showing up, keep doing the reps, keep moving with intention, because when you do emerge, when the results finally speak, it won't be because you were loud, it'll be because you were ready. And readiness is something that only silence can build. In a culture that rewards visibility, we've been taught to speak our dreams into the world, to declare our intentions, to let everyone know what we're working on. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with ambition, the truth is that far too many people fall in love with talking about the goal instead of working toward it. But when you let your results speak louder than your words, something powerful happens. You shift your focus from proving to improving. There's a quiet power in letting your work do the talking. It's the difference between announcing that you're going to run a marathon and actually training every day in silence, then crossing the finish line without ever having made a single post about it. One path seeks attention, The other builds character, and only one of them actually gets you to the goal. When you spend your time constantly talking about what you're going to do, you can start to feel like you've already accomplished something because people praise your ambition, they admire your vision. But this can be dangerous. It gives you the illusion of progress without the substance. Talking about it becomes a substitute for doing the hard, uncomfortable, often boring work required to actually make it happen. Letting your results speak is an act of discipline. It means resisting the temptation to seek quick validation. It means choosing silence over applause, at least for now. It's not about hiding your achievements, it's about earning them. It's about giving yourself the space to grow, to fail, to refine, without the pressure of an audience watching your every move. We've all seen people who make big declarations. This is the year I'm going to change. Watch me do this. Big things coming soon. But how often do those words fade? How many of those promises go unfulfilled? That's because it's easier to announce than it is to execute. Words are easy. Action is hard. True success doesn't come from talking, it comes from doing, from the repetition, from the long hours when no one's watching, from the days when you don't feel like showing up, but you do anyway. That kind of consistency can't be faked. And when it finally produces results, you won't need to explain. People will see the impact. Letting your results speak isn't about being secretive or mysterious. It's about being grounded. It's about trusting the process enough that you don't need to broadcast every step. You know the work is being done. You know the progress is real. And when the time comes, your life, your transformation, your success, that will be your loudest statement. There's also something incredibly freeing about this approach. When you stop trying to impress people, you free up energy to actually improve. You stop worrying about how things look and start focusing on how things are. You don't need to manage other people's expectations because your only job is to meet your own. That's where real confidence is built. Not in being praised, but in knowing that you're doing what needs to be done, even if no one's clapping yet. So ask yourself, am I more focused on being seen working or actually doing the work? Am I chasing results or am I chasing recognition? If you want to build something that lasts, something real, something meaningful, let your results be your response. Let your progress speak volumes without you ever needing to say a word. Because the truth is, when your life becomes the evidence, your words become unnecessary. And when people finally ask, how did you do it? You can smile and say, I stayed quiet and I stayed consistent. There's a misconception that in order to lead, you need to be the loudest voice in the room, that you need to constantly speak, constantly push, constantly assert yourself to prove your worth. But the truth is, real leadership doesn't demand attention, it commands respect. Quietly. Because leadership rooted in purpose, not noise, is the kind that endures. In today's world, we're surrounded by volume, social media, business, politics. Everyone is shouting to be heard, competing for clicks, followers, recognition. It's tempting to believe that if you're not making noise, you're not making an impact. But the reality is many of the most powerful leaders, the ones who influence deeply, not just widely, lead with intention, not volume. They don't need to constantly promote themselves because their presence speaks louder than their words. Purpose-driven leadership is not about getting people to notice you. It's about making decisions that align with a deeper mission. When you lead from a place of purpose, you don't have to seek validation. Your work becomes the proof, your character becomes the message, and your consistency becomes your legacy. When you're focused on purpose, you're not pulled in 100 different directions by trends or opinions. You're grounded, you're clear on what matters. That clarity allows you to lead with confidence, even when things are uncertain, even when others doubt you, because you're not reacting to the noise, you're responding to something much deeper inside yourself. This kind of leadership also creates trust. People can feel the difference between someone who's in it for applause and someone who's in it to serve. When your motivation is genuine, when you're showing up not to impress, but to impact, people follow you because they believe in what you stand for, not because you shouted the loudest, but because you live the most authentically. And here's something most people overlook. When you lead with purpose, you don't need to compete. There's no need to tear others down or constantly prove your superiority. Instead, you uplift, you support, you create space for others to grow too. Because you're not threatened by their light, you're secure in your own. The loud one demands attention. The strong one earns trust. Noise fades, purpose doesn't. The hype, the trends, the likes, they all come and go. But the impact of someone who led with integrity, vision, and heart, that lasts. That's remembered. People don't follow noise forever. They follow those who move with consistency, clarity, and courage. Leading with purpose also means accepting responsibility. It means doing the hard things even when they're not popular. It means staying true to your values when it would be easier to compromise. It means being honest even when it's uncomfortable. That's not always flashy. It's rarely celebrated in the moment, but over time it builds something unshakable: trust. And when you lead like this, you attract the right people, the people who resonate with your mission, the ones who are inspired not just by your words, but by your actions. You become a leader not because you asked to be followed, but because others chose to walk with you. Not because you were loud, but because you were real. So if you feel like you're being overlooked because you're not the loudest, take heart. Stay focused, stay intentional, stay consistent. You don't need to outshout anyone. You just need to outlast the noise. Because when the dust settles, the leader who stayed true to their purpose will be the one still standing, quiet, steady, and deeply respected. In the end, leadership isn't about how much noise you make, it's about how much meaning you bring. And meaning, unlike noise, never goes out of style.